Hello, everybody. Welcome to my Monday stream, my awesome new show called Women Are. It is a panel show with creative, awesome professional women sharing their ups and downs in a funny and fun, frank way. And I said that 3 F's in a row. I am really excited for the second episode. We have an amazing set of guests here who have insight in all sorts of different aspects of the comic book and also the Hollywood world, which we'll definitely have bleed over in our conversation with, but definitely focusing on comic creation, art, writing, all of it, layout, publishing, all of it. Just to remind you, this show's goal is to inspire and educate, and most specifically to show women, especially younger ones, that all creative fields are open to them and possible to aspire to or to go into as a career. Visibility equals possibility. So based on last week's show, you guys had so many amazing questions that I am leaving a little bit more time, like 25 minutes at the end to address you guys' input. So please post questions in the chat. My amazing mods and my producer, Britt, will be putting those in a document for me after I get through my sections, and we will be addressing your questions. So thank you very much for that. Also, we every week give away $750 to a charity of choice that ties into the theme of our week. And this week is going to be heroinitiative.org. So Hero Initiative is it creates a financial safety net for comic creators who might need emergency aid, financial support for essentials of life, and an avenue back into paying work. So it has given over $1 million worth of aid fueled by contributions. It's a charity, so any contributions are deductible. And right now in this crazy COVID time, I know that $1 will go a long way. So if you guys want to support Hero Initiative along with us, go to heroinitiative.org. All right, let's get into the panel because we have 4 amazing women here. They are so excited. I'm so excited to have them here. I would love for you guys, one at a time, I'm going to throw it out to you guys one at a time, just to give a little bit about yourselves so we can get to know you and get into all the awesome questions, starting with Tanika Stotz.
Hey everybody, I'm Tanika Stotz. I'm an Emmy-nominated animation writer who worked on Steven Universe Future and Craig of the Creek. I'm also an Ignatz Eisner award-winning comics creator and co-founder of Ascend Comics. Create what you love what you create.
Yay! Amazing. Your work is incredible. Like I said before we started, my friend Annie gave me your anthologies that we'll talk about later. And they were on the floor of my car for about a year, but great things live on the floor of my car, including sentient muffins. Anyway, our next amazing guest is Kelly Sudaconic. Kelly, could you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
I'm a comic book writer, pretty standard fare. You probably know, if you know my work at all, you probably know from Captain Marvel or Aquaman, or I was the first woman writer of an ongoing Avengers title with Avengers Assemble. And I also do some independent books, Pretty Deadly and Bitch Planet, and I developed
Bitch Planet.
Yes. Hey, right on.
So good.
I developed television for Legendary Entertainment.
Yeah, awesome. Yes, Bitch Planet. Bitch Planet is the height of everything, but we could talk about that later. Lee Luna, could you tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Lee. This is my screaming intern Hiromu. He's also and wants to participate. I make primarily middle grade comics, which is the age range of mostly elementary school, but like a little bit later elementary school. I also worked on Steven Universe. I was not a writer on it though. I was a colorist on it. Yeah, I work in animation as well, just not on the writing side.
Amazing. And last but not least, Aminder Dhaliwal, who is a friend of mine, but I mean, I consider all of you friends except Tanika. I mean, yes, we're all friends now, but I've known Aminder, I've known Kelly Sue the longest.
Club. Thank you.
Okay, I love you. Sorry. This is my charm. I'm not quite good at things. Aminder Dhaliwal, could you talk about a little about yourself?
Oh gosh, that was great. I'm Aminder Dhaliwal. I am a storyboard artist, writer, and director in animation. I've worked at Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, made my rounds Netflix. And then I also work in comics, and I'm gonna just pull them up here. My first
Ooh.
graphic novel, Woman World, came out in 2018, published by Drawing Quarterly. And then I have another book coming out with them in 2021 called Cyclopedia Exotica. And then I just had my indie comic, Dead End Jobs for Ghosts, come out with Shortbox just, I think, like a month ago. And I had a lot of fun making this one.
I don't know how I missed that. I saw it when I was Googling you, because I know I've worked with Aminder for the last year and a half, 2 years, my God, on as a producer on adapting Woman World for the screen, which it will happen. But I had no idea. So I was very excited to see both of those things out and about. So I'm going to start with one basic question. What got you guys into comics? And especially were there any women in your life who kind of inspired you to get into comics creation, or just even just the basic reading of it?
I can jump in.
Oh, good. Yeah.
I started kind of more into animation first. That's just kind of my entry point. I was watching a lot of animation. And then the first time I really started devouring comics was when I went from, when I discovered Persepolis. That was had a massive just impact on me. And then to see the animated version come out, it kind of combined these two worlds that I just loved. So it was really exciting. So yeah, Marjane Satrapi's work was kind of what got me right in.
Amazing. Lee, what inspired you and what hooked you early on in comics?
Yeah, my grandmother and my dad both had a big part in me making comics. My dad is just a nerd. Like he just is a nerd, and he loves strip comics especially. So I grew up reading a lot of Calvin and Hobbes, a lot of Get Fuzzy, a lot of Betty and Veronica type stuff. Basically, yeah, anything that I could get my hands on that had some sort of female character in it, I was really about. And they really, really were encouraging of that, especially when not especially when I was younger, but I had a really hard time learning how to read. And I think a lot of kids have a hard time learning how to read. So specifically, I read a lot of comics during that time period because I think that they can be a really cool transitional tool between, early reader, full picture books and chapter books, obviously. Yeah, so that was my entry point.
Yeah, I found a scrapbook that was in my storage unit that I was obsessed with Calvin and Hobbes, but also Opus, the penguin from Bloom County. And I was obsessed, and I would cut them out and paste them in continuously. And now I do that with my baby who loves Leo. I don't know if you guys read Leo. It is so dark, and sometimes I have to explain things to her. They're a little bit uncomfortable because she's 3. But anyway, Kelly Sue, what inspired you to get in there? And it's interesting. Were there any female characters in comics that drew you in more, or was it just like a Marvel, or what really hooked you?
I'm probably significantly older than most everybody here. I'm 50.
Okay, you look 30, so that's all you need.
A lot. But yeah, so I started reading comics in the 70s, growing up on Air Force bases overseas, because this is pre-internet and pre lots of television this is pre-cable, right? So so I'm elderly, basically, is what I'm telling you. And,
oh no.
But there wasn't a lot. There was one American television station. And so we read, and Air Force bases, it makes sense that people who are drawn to service would be drawn to the dominant genre of superheroes. So Air Force bases, a lot of comics were a big part of the culture, and there was a wide range of comics available. And so that was kind of how I started, was just at the Stars and Stripes bookstore on base. And my mom would buy me my 2, Wonder Woman and Vampirella were my 2 first books.
Vampirella is kind of problematic.
So is Wonder Woman.
So is Wonder Woman, Red Sonja, same thing. They're very problematic.
Yeah.
At the time, but as a little kid, you don't think about that, right? Like you just think, oh, they're cool, and there's a woman there, and it doesn't matter how scantily clad there is, but you do form this idea of what a woman hero is based on that, right? It's almost unconscious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you know, yeah, like when you're thirsty, you'll taste what you can get, right?
It's true.
And so
They didn't have a Ms.
thirsty
Marvel.
means something different now, doesn't it? I messed that up.
Listen, there's a whole generation of nomenclature that I just learned the word yeet. There's a lot, like sus. There's a lot of nomenclature. There's a lot. Okay. Tanika, what was your entry point into comic books?
Manga. I'm going to take it back to where I kind of grew up. Same with a little bit base stint in Lubbock, Texas, where I fell in love with Tales from the Crypt and creepy and a lot of eerie and old school science fiction and horror comics. Was kind of my very basis. However, then I ran into a very expensive habit at a very young age called manga. My mom did not like buying all of the books that I wanted to, but you know what? $25 per Romiko Takahashi, whatever. It's cool. It's what is my basic collection even still to this day. Finding out that a lot of mangakas were women at the time, and learning that their styles of comics and storytelling were something that resonated with me very deeply at that time, since American comics were very historically racist and also had a very underlying note of pure sexism. I wasn't really that hot about them, but for manga, I found that I not only fell in love with the empowerment of women being the heroes and feeling like it emulated myself, and also seeing the occasional Black character with blonde hair, made me really, really into their just kind of like general overall story arcs, storytelling, and told me that I could be even more creative with my own sense of stories, and hence why I started writing.
No, that's amazing. It's kind of goes back to what Kelly was saying about like, yeah, Vampirella. Now I look at some of the things, I'm like, whoa. But like when you're thirsty, you'll take anything. And when you need to see a character who looks like you will take literally anything, because it will all fuel your imagination and your possibility. So that's really fascinating. What actually I want to talk about a little bit is how you guys got into your own careers, and each one of you, the more I research you, that has a fascinating sort of offbeat sort of way into this world. Like Kelly, it was weird stalking you online because I actually grew up on a lot of military bases myself, and I never had any friends because I was homeschooled. Like the one time I ever saw kids, it was when my mom like dropped me off at the base daycare. It was like, go make some friends, but like once in 8 months, I was like, this didn't really work, Mom. But like you getting into this I guess, I don't know if this is true, but is because you started translating manga? Is that correct?
My first significant paying gigs in comics were for I think 7 years. I wrote the English adaptations of Japanese and Korean comics, which is a fascinating gig in and of itself, and incredibly good for you start. It's like a dialogue boot camp. I wrote over 11,000 pages of dialogue.
How does that even work? Can you speak Korean or Japanese, or did you work with a translator and then you would kind of reword it? How does that even process work?
So it's I have some Japanese, I'm not fluent, and I have less Korean. I have like, I can count and say please and thank you, and like taekwondo moves in in Korean. But no, you work with this. It's why it's our language for the job hasn't really caught up. They call you the author of the adaptation or the rewriter, but the gig is you're working with someone, ideally someone for whom Japanese or Korean is their first language.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're making decisions about whether or not you want to localize, whether or not you want to modernize in some cases. But ideally, from my approach to the job, ideally your hand is somewhat invisible. If you do it well, it's not your style, it's their style, but you need to have a consistent voice for that character throughout. And then you also, because Japanese is oriented vertically,
Mhm.
and it's a very spare language. So like in English, we have something like 16 tenses. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it's something
No
like
idea.
that. In Japanese, there are two. And so in everything, it's an island culture. Everything is about not taking up space, even the language, except for when they add things on, they will add things on to be polite, right? So,
Interesting. Yeah.
so you have to kind of make that work in English, where you don't want to change the shapes of the balloons any more than is absolutely necessary, because then you're covering art.
Yeah.
And so you're not only trying to get a consistent character with as few words as possible, but you're also trying to do it with literally as short of words as possible.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting exercise.
But it seems like the perfect thing to train you to be a comics writer, because I mean, like, you not only are you looking at other people's work all the time, but the puzzle of fitting as little into as little space as possible. When I wrote a bunch of comics for the Guild and a couple of other things, and the constant struggle was to how to convey this in fewer words. How do I cut these balloons down? It was always that, because I come from a very verbose, I mean, listen to me, but also just like I came from web series, which is like, all we have is words. We don't have any production value. It's the complete inverse of comics. You have all the production value in the world, but no room for it, right?
Also, in comics, space equals time, right? So we make time visible on the page. And the more room you take up, the longer you make someone stay in that time, the bigger that time becomes, if that makes sense. So it's the craft of it is really fascinating. It requires a lot of discipline, and and you need, in traditional pamphlet comics, you only have 22 pages to make someone feel like they've had a meal, and that's tough. It's
tough because you can't and it's almost like the rhythm of reading across the page. You don't want it to be all about the dialogue, right? Like, and as a book reader, I'm always having to constantly reteach myself how to read a comic. So that's really interesting that you say that. Aminder, I would love to talk a little bit about how you got, so you said that you came from more of a animation background, right? How did you decide to jump in the comics? And because the origin of Women World is wonderful and very inspiring, and I think that journey would be really valuable for people to hear. Like, what made you to decide to jump over there, and how did you find that journey?
So nice to hear you say that. It's like my producer mom is talking to me.
Oh, that's fine. I'm sorry. There's a hawk outside my window. There's a hawk on the top of my trampoline, and he just took a poop there. It's a hawk, and I'm in the middle of LA. Anyway, it's your totem animal, Aminder. Tell me about it.
So I was like mostly in animation, though there's a massive like Venn diagram when it comes to animation and comics. There's a lot of the same people, but I never considered myself like a comics person first. I was posting like daily strip, like, diary comics. That's about it. But for a whole bunch of years, I was doing pilots and a lot of development work in animation. And I just got so exhausted of the NDAs. I was so tired of not being able to show anything I worked on. And especially when something wasn't picked up and it was like, you were kind of over it. It was like, do I even want to share it now? You had like an odd relationship with it. So I like got out of a big development deal and I was like, I just want to make something that's me. I just want to make something that's purely me and it hasn't been touched by anyone else. And webcomics seemed the way to do that. So I started posting Woman World after going to the Women's March in 2017. And I had seen all the, the features female signs. And I was like, that'd be funny. And so I just started posting comics about that and it started taking off. And then I kind of ended up backwards trying to be like, oh, now how do I get into the publishing side? How do I make this into a physical book I can actually pick up?
Yeah, but you DIY'd it because the proof of concept kind of proved to the publisher that it was worthy of being invested in. So that's like you gilded yourself, which I've always admired. And you've also mentioned the process of web comics, which is accessible to everybody. Like anybody can do that in public. You don't have to wait for permission. You don't have to wait for a publishing deal. You can do that in however format you want. I remember first reading Nimona by Noelle Stevenson. Like when she first started doing it, I was like, this is the most brilliant thing I've ever read. And so you can come out of nowhere, anywhere in the world with your own self-generated art. And did you
And
feel
you're getting like instant feedback as well. You're getting like your fan like interaction right away. So it's really fascinating because you can tell right away what's not clear.
Yeah.
My first Woman World comic starts with the main character saying the men are extinct, and the assumption a whole bunch of people made in the comments was the women kill the men, and I was like, whoa. No, I don't know why we went to such a violent assumption right away. But it was like fascinating because my mind hadn't been there at all. But that's all it took was a couple of comments to be like, oh, the second comic will be about how that's not what happened.
Yeah, so that's interesting because it was more of an interactive world. Like, so it did influence the way that you wrote the comic, how the audience would receive different characters and things like that. That's really fascinating.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, they definitely like decided not necessarily what the storyline would be, but what I might need to clarify.
Yeah. Tanika, I love your journey because not only did you start with slam poetry, which I quite frankly don't know exactly how that works, but also you have your own publishing imprint. You have multiple imprints, and I'd love for you to share that journey of how you decided to. I mean, obviously you said you love manga, so you came from a visual place, but you came from more an oral artistic tradition into comics. How did that work, and why did you just start deciding to do your own imprint?
Okay, well, I'll start where it is in the beginning, which is slam poetry. So, slam poetry is standing on a stage and pretty much slamming down your words within a time limit and getting voted on it by those who stand behind you. And you kind of go from there. You put your words together in books, much like a zine, but they're called chapbooks. They're staple bound. We used to use them on tour. And back in ye old days of LiveJournal, there was a couch network for women to travel across the country and stay on people's couches safely and to travel from venue to venue to venue across the United States. I've actually made it around this country 3 times that way.
What? So did you get paid for it, or was it just, I mean, how does that work in slam poetry? Like, how?
Well, you don't really get paid unless you win the pot. So you got to have a good mouth for that.
Wow. So you're basically going around trying to win money, or it's just, that's amazing.
Yeah. It's competition. So you have to have a good eye for reading a room, recognizing your audience, and then being able to deliver what you feel is going to get the most emotional value points.
Wow.
So that's kind of why I left. As much as I really liked it, it kind of felt a little false towards the end there for me. It's not, it's still a very valid art form. It's beautiful, and I love seeing what it's turned into now, where debate, which used to be a really big thing in high schools, is now moved towards poetry, and now there's youth nationals and children's poetry slams and such like that. So it's really great to see another creative outlet. But pretty much it gave me my start as far as zine making, that really cut my teeth in a proverbial way. And therefore, I moved on into splicing in my own images, learning what copyright was and adhering to it, and not breaking many rules. And then pretty much from there, I went into comics with my wife. Well, at the time, she was my girlfriend. We were together for like 13 and a half years. They say keep it in-house. I did. She was the lead production technician at Dark Horse for 5.5 years. So pretty much all of the power and energy that came from like Mike Mignola books or Greg Rucka all spilled into like my own work, as far as just like the inspiration and understanding how to do things like Pantone, or what were the proper DPIs and the percentages you wanted to have for your K value. Learning these things starts making your mind kind of spin as far as, well, how far can I stretch this and how can I make it even more special? I don't want to just be a boutique press, but I want to make a limited number of independent books that go out into the world and make a really visual impact. And not only does it heighten my portfolio, but everybody who was showcased in that book gets that same height. So that's why I started putting anthologies together. I started with Beyond the Queer Science Fiction and Fantasy Comic Anthology. I was actually just someone who had submitted regular, like any old person. I made it through the slew of all the people who submitted. From there, I rolled into somehow being the editor and therefore then the publisher. And
Wow.
within minutes and a Kickstarter, I put it together.
It's incredible. It is like really incredible. And what led you to go that route versus like trying to, I mean, Aminder's talking about, DIYing her woman world out of the tragedy that is Hollywood development. Lee, I know that you are part of the Hollywood system. If you could talk about like that, and then we could transition to like how do you work within the system and still retain your art? But Lee, I want to talk to you a little bit about your journey, because you started from a visual part versus Tanika, who started from more of a dialogue. Like, how did you find your way through, and what inspired you to get into do your own work on the side as well as doing the animation?
Sure. I've been making comics like forever, like literally, like I think I was probably 6 and Rocket Power was on, and there is an episode where they make zines, and I was like, yep, me too. I didn't understand what a photocopier was, so I like hand drew out like 12 of these zines and like brought them to school, and like no one cared but me, and that's fine. But it has just been a thing that I have always done. Specifically has been comics. So when it came time to like do the, like middle class American privileged dance, I went to art school. I majored in cartooning, which you can do at like 3 different schools in this country. But the school that I went to, which is the Minneapolis College of Art and Design, their program I felt leaned more on the art side than on the writing side, which is not necessarily like, that's not a problem. That's just, yeah, it's just how it is. Yeah. But partially because of that, I have felt much more an artist than a writer up until I would say recently. Yeah. But figuring that out. So I'm very much still figuring out like how I think of myself as an author or a writer in any capacity. Right now I'm working on a book for Scholastic, and that has definitely like helped with the imposter syndrome and calling myself that. Yeah. But it's the first thing that I've written in like entirety. It's like 200 pages. And before that, I had, similarly to Aminder, just done mini comics and printed them and taken them to like independent festivals and prayed people would like me. One year, I think one of the biggest moments in my career that like snowballed into where I am now was I had the book that I'm working on now for Scholastic. It's called Clementine. And I had originally made it 30-ish pages. It was a mini comic. I took it to the Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland. I didn't have my own table. Someone else was nice enough to like let me stick some stuff on their table.
Oh my God.
I was 19. And this woman named Sheena Wolf picked it up, and she was an editor at Andrews McNeil, and she was like, do you want to run this as a webcomic weekly on our site for a while? And that's the Universal Press Syndicate. Like those are the people that do publish Calvin and Hobbes and all of the stuff that had inspired me when I was really young. And my work didn't quite fit in there because it was narrative as opposed to like a weekly thing, but it was like an incredible opportunity, and it has like led to other publishers finding my work and like finding a different place for it. And it also led to me working on a bunch of stuff for like Boom and Arcadia and doing I don't know, stuff that like let me live and work as an artist, which it might be like the most exciting work, but
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You're doing that versus like sitting behind a desk somewhere wishing you were doing your art, right?
Yes, I am no longer bartending, and that is the best part.
Yes. So my question for all of you, have how many of you have traditionally just have to put a pitch document together and pitched a series to people, just hoping they would pick it up and make it? Have any of you done it, or you're just basically doing your own thing? Because
I've always made mine first. Like I want to make a version of it that's just me. I've never just never put together a pitch.
A pitch. Tanika, if you've made your own stuff, you just make your own anthologies that look amazing.
Pretty much, I just publish it by myself. However, I have done one pitch, and it did get accepted, and it did get purchased. It actually ended up being my first comic that I got nominated for an Eisner for.
Oh, amazing. All right.
Yeah. So
Kelly Sue, I feel like
I've done many pitches. Yes.
So those documents are basically what people preach online about how you get a comic made, right? What is there a special technique that you use? Do you believe in that? Do you think people should do both things as far as like making their own stuff, but also pitching? I mean, it's just it's kind of the equivalent of Hollywood pitching, right? How do you approach it? You would never have to do it now, right? Or do you?
Oh yeah. Oh no, I totally have to pitch.
What?
Oh yeah.
That's crazy.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
You're the Grand Duchess of comics. Like what?
I mean, like there's some pitches are smaller than others, but I mean, I'm working on a book for a major publisher right now that's a superhero book. It's approved, but I still have to pitch I got the gig. I'm on it. I still have to pitch my storyline.
It's weird to me. Does everybody have to do that? Like, it doesn't matter how. Wow.
I mean, there are a couple of people that I know of that like the companies will make do with whatever they turn in. But for the most part, not. Especially, I mean, it makes sense when you think about the shared universe aspect.
Yeah.
Like they need to coordinate all of these characters together. There is we could have a whole other conversation. I have a thing I can get a little preachy about that concerns me, where it bothers me that the dominant publishers in our industry remain the superhero shared universe publishers, which become corporate comics as they've become parts of bigger and bigger.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And that's fine, except I don't think that those companies understand what they bought. I don't think they understand the value of what they bought. I think they bought IP.
Yeah.
And what they bought was R&D.
Mhm.
And when they treat it like IP, they're neglecting the actual value. You're valuing the egg, not the hen.
Yeah.
What comics, where our value comes from isn't, Batman in particular, or Superman or Wonder Woman or whatever. It's not, or Spider-Man, just lest we get letters, but
more mans at the end of everything.
Yes, or more men. Yes.
Right, yes. I mean those characters are of value. That IP is of value, but that is not what makes those comic publishers of value. What makes the comic publishers of value, and what makes our medium of value. And we don't have to worry about the medium isn't going anywhere, but the industry I do have concerns for. And what makes us of value is we're fast and we're cheap. And because we're fast and we're cheap, we can be innovative.
Yes.
And that is what makes us particularly special.
Yeah, like there was when they first put some hawk wings on a dude and we're like, this is a character. Like, who back then would have been like, great, that's a great idea. It's because you could throw those crazy things against the wall. And at the time, that was crazy innovative. Nobody would have allowed that to happen. I totally hear you. It's the Hollywoodization of, it's IP driven, where people are just doing comic books to make a movie because they're just kind of manipulating the back door to get in. Same thing with podcasts, like cheap IP development and no thought to the actual venue itself, A, and B, crushing any original thought, where you can risk, I mean, you're not paying these people. You can't really, how many people make a living on comics only, right? So like, at least let people play in a sense. But because the conglomerates are owning them, they're being way too careful and precious. And therefore the root of what actually created the value up top, quote unquote, is not even allowed to be grown in a sense.
Yeah, it is. That's probably my biggest concern right now. For our, I don't worry about the mechanics of the industry, like especially the young folks are going to innovate. Like I know the direct market is in trouble. I know that is a thing, but the kids will find a way. That's what they're for. Like, you know,
Your purpose as a child.
The kids will eventually form and make a guild and, you know, get paid a not bottom line that makes them all cheap and accessible and constantly being worked to the point where their wrists no longer feel good.
Yeah.
The kids
Well, and there's a role for the olds to help that happen as well. But like structurally, the medium's going to be fine. You know, comics have existed since Lascaux, right? So we're not going to stop telling we're telling stories with words and pictures. That's not a problem. But the industry as it exists today is not going to continue to exist. Yeah. What it's going to look like as we move forward, you know, there's a lot to figure out there, and there's a lot of people who are going to lose their income and
lose their comic shops, because who's really going to do their poll? I mean, I never bought weekly comics because I've never been a superhero necessarily comic fan, so I was always buying indie graphic novels anyway. But at the same time, like, the tradition of going and getting that weekly poll is just like, I don't have enough there because I like reading 700-page fantasy novels. So like, me reading 22 pages is like, that's not a meal. That's like the worst hors d'oeuvre. That's like a Trader Joe's quiche. It's not even big enough to be happy about it.
So the price of one comic relative to minimum wage has gone up 526% since 1961.
Amazing.
Yes. So now we're not only competing with the value of Netflix, right? For whatever your monthly subscription is, $15 or whatever it is, where you have like hours and hours and hours of quality entertainment, and also some garbage, but also hours and hours and hours of quality entertainment for that $15, right?
I like that garbage though.
I know. I watched the home edit the other day. It was just garbage. It was such garbage.
Y'all, we could just talk about my garbage diet right now.
Oh, I know. I eat it all. Oh, garbage me up. I don't know. I'd rather do garbage than something good anymore. I don't even know what it is.
I am all Lucifer all the time.
Oh, God.
That is garbage, but good garbage.
I love it so much.
He's really nice too, Tom. I've spent a couple cons with him. He's that guy though who always brings his acoustic guitar everywhere. I don't know if that crushes your crush or if it enhances it, but he always brings his guitar and he's very good, but he's always playing the guitar.
Was it like the show itself, like he sort of bursts into song, like it's almost a musical, and it should not work. You should be like, no. But somehow it does work. Although I have to say, I'm not actually there for him. He is lovely. He is
he's fine. Yeah, it's fine.
Water, as my mother would say.
No.
But Maze is like one of the few female fighters I've seen on television who sells it. Like, oh, she gonna kick your ass.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Her and Katie Leutz on, I don't know, I probably missed her name, but Katie on Tomorrow. She's like an incredible fighter. I don't want to watch anything of that show. I just want to see her fight scenes because she's so good.
Yeah, I would totally tune in for the Maze show. But
yeah.
We were talking about comics. I'm sorry.
I know. I could talk about this.
Lucifer is based on a comic, so hey, there's that, right?
Total tie-in, man. Yeah. Okay, before we get to, guys, send some audience questions to the chat, please. We're going to go to that. Because this is an awesome women empowerment show, I do want to talk a little bit about women specific. Like, have you guys encountered, when you tell people that you're in comics or through the comics process in the industry themselves, like, have you encountered issues based on your sex, and how did you get over them, and what would you advise people when they run into these things, which you inevitably will as a woman? How do you deal with these things in a mature, successful way, or not mature, successful way? Just punch people. Lee, what have you encountered anything like this? You look like you have a juicy thing.
I mean, of course, because I am a woman in comics and I'm working in a male-dominated industry. I was thinking about this. I've been thinking about this all morning because I figured that we would talk about it. And it's like I said, I've been in comics my entire life, but I do think that I got the majority of unfortunate interactions, if you will, when I was a fan and not while I was a professional. Because when I'm a professional, I can stand behind my table and you have to come here to talk to me and you're looking at my work and you're kind of forced to respect that. I do get people who come up to my table frequently and ask if it's my boyfriend's work. That's fun.
Great. That's wonderful.
Yeah. Which is always like hilarious too, because if you look at my work, it's very cute, and not that like, you know, any gender can draw whatever style you want. My work is feminine. I could say. I think the majority of unfortunate interactions I had when I was like before I was 21, which makes me feel uncomfortable. It's hard to be a younger woman in comics. It's hard to show up and demand the respect that you want within an industry that is full of men who really don't want to talk to you. Or if they do want to talk to you, it's because they really think that your American Apparel pants make your ass look out of this world.
Unbelievable.
Like,
yeah,
it's a weird time. So long story short, I think I lean personally more towards the ruder end of if someone tries to have an interaction with me that I dislike, I do tend to throw my boundaries up and tell them to go away, or that isn't acceptable or that it is inappropriate. And my favorite is that you can't speak to me that way.
Yeah, amazing.
That tends to go over really well.
Yeah, I have to say that personally, there are a couple of comic book artists, people other in the industry who I got along with really great, you know, and they treated me really well. And I realized, oh, that's because I'm kind of famous here. You know, like that was not the experience of a lot of women. And when stories started coming out about these artists, these writers, these other people, like I'm nauseated because, you know, I, as a person, did I help support this? Did I help, you know, how, or not just because about me, just to the fact that these people who I saw one side of them, they're treating especially people who they have more power over in a way that was disgusting and offensive and horrible. It's really tough. It's gone through every industry, but it seems like comics has really dealt with that a lot. And how do we teach young women to, when they're in that position of fan to artist, you know, that they admire, how do you even separate that from the way they value you as a person? I love that you brought that up. That was not a good way to put it, but Tanika,
No.
how have you encountered that in your time in comics itself? And how would you advise a younger girl to deal with that?
Well, you always need to have your kind of social networks and your safety networks at the same time. They're very important. I also like to point out that being part of the queer community, as well as being Black, unfortunately, we have quite a lot that we have to stand up to in the ways of adversity, especially when you're in public places such as conventions. Being able to set up an associative network of people who can kind of get you out of awkward situations or make sure that security knows something is happening within your relative area so it can be handled with very quickly is really smart. Being communicative, even that you might have worries or apprehensions with the convention or festival runners, is really smart as a way to kind of nip that in the bud in the first place. But thankfully, I haven't had too many bad interactions. Most people know that I'll just shout them down from my table regardless, because my professionalism is I will stomp you. And I don't really have a problem making that very clear with who I am and with my name. And if you are in my vicinity and someone is doing that to you, having your ears open as well as your eyes and being like, hey, stop being a shitburger, because I will walk from around this table and take care of you. It's kind of that verbal way of making sure that everybody in your space feels comfortable and that they know that there's someone there who might be a voice for them if they have social anxiety, if they feel a little awkward. It's a small family anyway, so it's good to know who may or may not suffer from those things and just be able to be that back for them if they need it in any sort of situation.
That's amazing. Yeah, I really, I think it is really about people supporting them and also just to educate people that they don't have to put up with things and be aware of it. And, when you have a power dynamic as a kid, you already accede so much power to anybody who's an adult, an authority figure. That's what you're trained to do, right? And then when you have somebody you admire their work, it's even more power so that your consciousness isn't even aware of when you're being either exploited, abused, or taken advantage of, right? You just kind of go with it. You're just happy to be there in a sense. And Kelly, I don't know, I always look at you as sort of the kick-ass, like I said, the grand dame of comics. You are the end all be all of cool, awesome creator. What do you like to give? What message do you like to give to women who are, or girls who are in this situation, who want to aspire to be in this industry? And were there any that you had to learn along the way, encounter, and how did you deal with it?
Whew.
It's a lot. I know we could do
Yeah.
4 hours just on this, but
Yeah. So a couple things. First, again, it is a different industry than it was when I was coming in, for one. For two, I come to this conversation with a shit. We can curse, right? We can
yeah,
curse
whatever.
here?
It's fine.
Okay. With a fuck ton, then we're going with fuck ton.
Yes.
With a fuck ton of privilege, as a white, straight, cisgendered woman, you know, my marginalization is pretty slight. So one thing I think is, I think this is less so. I think more, thankfully, more women know this now than did when I was coming in. But the thing that was really important to me was find your girls, because the culture will try to set you up against other women. And so it's like we're you know, you're all competing for the girl spot on the panel, right? And that's some bullshit. So what we have to do is we have to support one another, and those of us who are the least marginalized really need to step up and make space for people who pay a higher price for raising their voices.
Mhm.
And I think that is another aspect of it. Another thing too is that, you know, we talk about comics as a male-dominated industry, and while that is true, there are two industries that are not male-dominated. So it's kind of like, I don't know what the point of that is. All industries are male-dominated, even if there are not more. So even an industry like hairdressers and chefs, right? There are more women
Yes.
hairdressers. There are more women chefs. The highest paid people in hairdressing and chefdom, cooking. I don't know what the fuck. I don't.
Yeah, whatever. Cooking, whatever.
I'm the least inarticulate writer you'll ever meet. The highest paid people in those professions are all men.
100%. Yep.
So the only, I think it's adult film stars and fashion models, and I think like possibly also gymnastics. Those are like the three areas where women have actually make more money and they do more of the jobs.
Mhm.
So unless you're in those three professions, your job isn't male dominated. So we can just put that aside and do what you love, because you are going to face sexism regardless of the industry that you go into. You are going to face sexism in the world. So do what you love, because you're going to need that passion to carry you through those difficult situations, and you're going to need each other. And that's just the other thing is we really have to look out for one another. And those of us who have been very lucky with our privilege have to earn that luck. You don't earn luck before you get it, you earn it after. That's
Yep.
why it's luck.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. And it really, you know, I think that, and there is a pervasive thing in particularly geek worlds where I think there is sort of a persecution of women. There had been in the past. I think it's much better now. But like girl gamer being a dirty word, and girl nerd and girl geek, and that sort of labeling of identifying as a woman in that world was spit upon, was mocked, was derided, and that I could say firsthand, that's why in the past, when I first started, I rejected any girl sort of labels, because I'm like, I'm just one of the guys. We're all equal, you guys. But in reality, you're not equal. You're not. And ever.
Yeah, and every young woman with any sense about her goes through some period in her growing up where she's like, oh, I'm not like other girls. Right?
Exactly.
You know,
Exactly.
and that is fine and good, and it's of course because you're smart and you look at the world and you're like, oh, women are low status, I don't want to be low status, ergo I'm not like you. And that's fine. It is not fine if you still hold that position when you're over 17.
No,
you know,
and that status is both bestowed upon you by men.
Yes.
It's so then you're not even playing in a field you have any control over, because I guarantee you when you turn 40, you start being completely dismissed by the same people who lauded you before, and then you start having life crises. Like, did they even think I was talented? Was it because I was kind of cute that I wore, like a tight dress sometimes? So then you feel like, was it all a lie? And I was divided and conquered and dissuaded from unifying with other women because it was easier then that I was alone. Am I being a little strident?
I had a moment backstage at a convention years ago where a comic pro that I greatly admired, and he's from another generation, and I don't know why I mentioned that, but
I know what the feeling is, because we know it's not an excuse, but also at the same time, it's like you have a pre-existing friendship or relationship that existed at a said time before it kind of blew up. And I feel that's something that a lot of women are dealing with now, which is a lot of blowback and aftermath of realizing that these men or these masculine people that they knew are absolute and complete shitburgers. So no, that's why you said it.
Yep.
It's subconscious and it makes you feel that way. And unfortunately, we are the bearers of that kind of news continuing forward.
yeah, I mean, I don't actually really know this dude, but I admire his work, and his opinion meant a lot to me. And he talked to me about my book in a way, and like, nobody can keep up with everybody's comics, right? So there's a lot of like, someone meets you at a show and they're like, oh, I love your work. You don't press them on that, because there's a very good chance they haven't actually read your work.
Nope.
You know,
Unless you're Justin Bieber and you're like, tell me the lyrics of my song, please.
Yes.
I mean, I will tell you a story about Stan Lee. He, incredible guy, did incredible things in the world. I can't tell you how many times I sat in the guy's lap. Okay. So, that's just what came with Stan Lee. And like, I think back and I'm like, oh, that was not a good thing to do, but that was just Stan Lee, Like, yeah, everyone's wincing, but it's just, okay, it was probably 3 times, you guys. It wasn't a lot, but it was.
Did you think it was like a leathery chair or something? And you accidentally...
Did he have a bottle of Chianti?
It was at a party, and he's just like, come here. And I'm like, all right. Because she's just really old, Like, but you don't think like, oh, this is not kind of cool.
I'm still sorry you went through that.
He was not creepy. I mean, it wasn't like he was like, it was just the way it's just Stan's way. He wasn't creepy about it. He was just, come on over here, sit in my lap. Like, it was almost like Santa.
Keep digging, Felicia. This is getting better. Yeah.
Don't do that, women.
All your memories now.
Don't do that. Don't sit in anybody's lap, no matter how much you admire.
Yeah.
I think I like to tell people a lot this day and age is learn the power of the word no. Whether you worked in customer service or not before getting into this industry, you ain't got to accept everything. And in fact, learning the power of the word no as soon and fast as possible will get you further in life than sitting in someone's lap.
It was only twice, maybe 3 times.
Thanks to
I'm gonna finish the story about this dude backstage at the show.
Yeah, please finish the story, and then we're gonna take some audience questions.
Okay,
so he starts to, he says, I really like your work, and he starts to tell me things about my work, indicating that he's actually read my work, and I'm like, oh, like, it was so, yay, that's so cool. I felt really, really good. And then he said, yeah, most women can't write superheroes. I don't know why, but they can't. But clearly you can. And it was like,
oh,
what a compliment, guy. Thanks.
but it's that thing where it's like, and it's first of all, it treats women like we're like from another planet. We're like, and we don't, oh, look, dude, I am a 5 foot tall woman who has always sort of looked like a child. I can teach any man in any room about power fantasies, right? Like, like, oh, I want to blow you up with my brain. Like, I fucking get it. But this idea that like we're so incredibly different, and if one of you can do it, it has nothing to do with the fact that other people didn't get opportunities, clearly, because meritocracy is real. But like, you are an exception, and then you need to defend that ground, right?
Yeah, no, because then that's what encourages the scarcity of availability, a scarcity of success, and that leads us to push other women away. We don't want to unify with other women because it's only one of us. It's the thing about the panel, like it's only one of us that could be here on the top, because we haven't been taught to unify and be powerful together as much. And I'm kind of hoping that, like, I see it with my 3-year-old. When I read her stories, I'm like wincing when I read her a fairy tale, and I'm automatically changing it because I see that we treat women and women from birth, that they are different, and they are not the hero of most stories. And when they have a journey, inevitably the end will come with them being liked by a guy. And that is just like the base of a lot of fiction in kids, where we show kids. Like, if you look at who's the funny carrot, it's a male carrot. I'm like, why can the funny carrot not be a female? So I always try to change it. And so, like, especially Lee talking about working in comics are so huge with little kids now. I'm really hoping that other stories get through to show my baby that she can be a kick-ass ghost or a superhero, whatever, Ms. Marvel, all these amazing examples. But it is really hard because it starts from the beginning, not only teaching women that they're one thing, but teaching men that women are something separate than them, and vice versa.
Well, and it that, like, pitting women against women, like I still, every couple months someone will tweet at me something about, like, who would win in a fight, Wonder Woman or Captain Marvel, right? And it's like, that matchup doesn't make sense at all. Like, if you like, who would win in a fight, Captain Marvel or Green Lantern? Like, that makes sense. They're both like pilots. They're both kind of dicks. They both have cores. Like, I get that. All right.
Yeah.
But like this like, no, the women have to fight the women.
No. Yeah.
No?
I mean, it was almost like that in the last Avengers movie, when there was that whole scene with the women walking together. And I was like, why am I so angry right now? But I should love this. And some people were like, I love it. It's amazing. All the women are together. I'm like, screw that. Why are all the women together? And I don't know. It's like we're really going through some transition about, like, what do we embrace?
I had the opposite reaction to
you
that.
Were just like, yeah, exactly. No,
I teared up. I straight teared up when the like, when you see all the women come.
Yeah.
And I think for me, though, it was that moment wasn't tokenism. That moment was was billion-dollar companies saying, no, this is real, and the women heroes are significant. They are a force. They matter, and we're not gonna.
That's amazing.
I had a very visceral reaction.
I guess when I have that reaction, it's only because it felt like, please support this with the movies you're making. Like, show this relationship between women outside of male superheroes having. I'm like, we didn't even know they knew each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, so let's show them be friends outside of that. Hopefully, and there's a lot of things like Black Widow and all these things coming out that hopefully will illuminate that. But anyway, I'm not going to argue over it because now people are going to get mad at me. Okay, I'm going to do. They're already mad about the Stanley thing. Listen, I wasn't insulting the guy. Like, he wasn't being skeevy.
Telling a story.
I'm freaking out. Anyway, okay, let's do some questions. Dimagiv Photo asks, with the state of comics due to pandemic, remakes, rush to production on films, what do you see the needs evolving in the industry to better support and include women and people of color and LGBTQ voices? How do we support marginalized voices, especially in the state of the comics that is now, because it is not doing well financially, and that everything also always comes back to finances. Tanika?
Well, a lot of those marginalized genders or those folks of color, you can find them on Kickstarter. You can go check out what they are putting out, support their self-publishing movements. You don't have to just support them through Amazon or any other various means through publication. Making sure that even just retweeting really helps a person because you never know how far that might go versus just, dashing in with cash. Being able to put together platforms is really hard. It's not something I ask for just common people to do, but just keeping your eye out and socially being aware of what's currently going on and what pressures those people might feel at this time, to not always be performative or being on and not making comments to that. Really helpful for those folks right now. So just being supportive, general supportive, and providing whatever you can from the heart, it means a lot more and it goes a very long way.
And how do you support discovery? I think that's probably the main problem because if it's not on a shelf, right? How are people going to discover it? You kind of, I mean, I see a lot of retweets, but that's because I've done work to follow people who can get me to those retweets to the people who only have like 100 followers and stuff like that. Are there resources that you would recommend, like hashtags or anything like that?
There's the drawing black. There's the black drawing hashtag by Abel Hayford. There's the queers and comics and also creators of color databases, which are put together by Naomi. There's
Naomi.
Yeah, there's also various other forms of reading comics, not just on your shelf, but on the web at various websites like Webtoon or Tapastic. There's many other ways of reading comics and having them digested right to your phone. So I think being able to just go past beyond the means of a brick and mortar store or even ordering your books online and looking to those places to find comics is actually the next step for a lot of people to catch up with the rest of the world, which has already been doing this for a while.
Yeah. And I just want, now that you mention hashtags, I cannot, we can't stop this panel, which I'll get to two more questions, you guys. I'm sorry. I'm learning how to pace myself. Everyone's way too interesting. Visible Women, which is Kelly Sue's hashtag, is an incredible resource for finding women. Kelly, can you just, Kelly Sue, can you please just kind of explain your motivation a little bit behind that and how active it is and what people can find there if they search hashtag Visible Women on Twitter?
Yeah, so we are one of many. This was started for because I had a lot of well-meaning colleagues who would come to me and say that they wanted to hire women for particular gigs, but they just couldn't find any. And it was like, really? And so the notion was to play with the idea, the Marvel's first superheroine had the power of being invisible, which is sort of hilarious. And so we started Visible Women. It was originally in February and August of every year, but we moved to March and August to not step on the toes of Drawing While Black, which happens in February. And it makes a lot more sense actually because Black History Month and International Women's Month. So it's very cool. And what we do is on that day, I give over my Twitter feed to signal boosting the portfolios of women who work in comics or publishing in general. And we if you follow our format that's suggested, we'll signal boost you, and then we take your information and we put it on a spreadsheet, and then we make that spreadsheet available to any hiring professional in the publishing industry for free.
Amazing.
And there's about 300 names on the spreadsheet every time, give or take. And we're trying to figure out if there's, right now it's tough because this is just something that we do for free and it takes a couple days. And what I would like to do, So when we send out the list, we send it out and say, like, here's how we suggest you use it. Like, divide the list up. There's 300 here. You can't go through 300 portfolios yourself. Divide it up in the office with who's doing the hiring. Everybody go through like 20 portfolios, pick their favorites, and then also we suggest to all the hiring professionals and to everyone who submits to Visible Women, get a lawyer involved. Don't, you always want to protect yourself. And we can't vouch for anybody on either side of this. But it's pretty cool. It's
an amazing resource. And every time I see it go by, it's just, I always click and I'm like, whoa, look at these talented, incredible people. And I end up following people from France, from, Australia, all around the world, all sorts of backgrounds. And I'm exposed artistically to so many wonderful voices. So check out both of those hashtags. I'm so sorry, you guys, we're out of time. I need to pace myself better with the question. I mean, honestly, all of you are so fascinating. Your journeys are so inspiring. And I really hope that a couple of people come out of this chat room and start making something of their own. And a lot of them start supporting all of your work. Can each of you tell us where to find your work and how they could support you and follow you? Aminder, could you go first?
Sure. I'm on Instagram at Aminder_D. And then you can also find Woman World on Webtoons and my new comic Cyclopedia Exotica, forgot the name of my own book, on Tapastic.
Such a good name.
So good. And the comics are so funny. I can't wait. I was so excited to see that was coming out. Lee, where can people find your work? And you?
I'm at Lee Christine on Instagram, and my book Clementine Fox will be out with graphics hopefully sometime next year, and hopefully we'll be able to all go to a Scholastic book fair and buy it.
Yay! The art looks incredible. It really does.
Thank you.
Tanika, where can people find your work and also these anthologies that are, I have to tell you guys, they're the most beautiful. The pages are so weighty and the colors are so gorgeous and the content is great. Where can people find these anthologies and follow you?
First off, thanks to my wife, Christina McKenzie, for making my books look gorgeous.
They are beautiful.
Next up, you can find me at tanikastotz.com. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Tanika Stotz. I make it pretty easy and simple. My books are available on my store, but right now we're closed due to COVID. We should be open within December. Sorry, folks.
Yay. And Kelly Sue, where can everyone find you and follow you? And in the last, what do you want them to focus on?
Don't follow me. Get off social media. It's bad for all of us.
Stop. We can't. I want to delete Facebook so bad, but I have too many people over there. It's too much.
I already did it. You can do it too.
I have too many people. How do I move them all? They're not going anywhere. They don't move.
Just leave them behind.
Okay, Kelly, what book could people pick up? Pretty Deadly?
You can pick up Aquaman right now. You can pick up Bitch Planet or Pretty Deadly. Third volume of Pretty Deadly just came out this year. I'm very, very, very proud of that book.
Amazing.
And if you are on Twitter, like myself, you foolish soul, there is a phone number in my bio, and you can text me at that number, and
don't abuse this, you guys.
Yeah, so we can chat that way. You can also, if there's any chat questions we didn't get to, you can follow up with me there.
Yeah, she has some amazing resources of like lists of comics for kids, which I'm literally buying almost all of for my baby.
I gotta update that. That's getting old now, actually.
Yeah, but there's still great suggestions. So yeah, please follow everybody's work. Thank you, all of you. Our next week's Women Are will be video game designers. So please check in at Monday, 2 p.m. next week. I'm sorry we went a little over, you guys, but you're so fascinating. I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye, audience. Bye, chat. See you later.